The Christmas party was supposed to bring our family together, but watching my 7-year-old daughter Emma sit empty-handed while every other child unwrapped gifts felt like watching her heart break in real time. My mother-in-law Patricia handed presents to distant cousins I barely knew, but somehow forgot the granddaughter who lived 20 minutes away. Emma's small fingers twisted in her red velvet dress as tears threatened to spill. Then my husband James stood up, reaching into his jacket pocket. The envelope he pulled out would change everything we thought we knew about this family. I should have known this Christmas Eve would be different the moment we pulled into the circular driveway of Robert and Patricia Henderson's sprawling colonial home. The house stood like a fortress against the December snow, every window glowing with warm light and perfectly placed wreaths. Patricia had outdone herself with the decorations this year, as if the elaborate display could somehow compensate for the coldness that had crept into our family gatherings. Emma bounced in her car seat, clutching the homemade ornaments she had carefully crafted for each grandparent and cousin. Her excitement was infectious, and for a moment, I let myself hope that this year might be different. Maybe Patricia would finally show some genuine affection for our daughter. Maybe the subtle slights and obvious favoritism I had noticed over the past 6 years were just in my imagination. "Mommy, do you think Grandma Patricia will like the reindeer I made her?" Emma asked, holding up a construction paper creation covered in glitter and love. "I'm sure she will, sweetheart," I replied, though my stomach churned with familiar anxiety. James reached over and squeezed my hand, sensing my tension. "Everything will be fine, Annabelle," he whispered. "It's Christmas." But as we approached the front door, decorated with an enormous wreath that probably cost more than our weekly grocery budget, I could already hear the sounds of celebration inside. Through the frosted glass panels, I glimpsed the warm glow of the living room where 30-plus relatives had already gathered. Patricia opened the door before we could ring the bell, her silver hair perfectly styled and her red silk dress complementing the holiday decor. She immediately enveloped James in an enthusiastic embrace, kissing both his cheeks with theatrical affection. "My darling boy, you look wonderful," she gushed, then turned to Tyler's 3 children who had apparently arrived just before us. "And my precious angels. Come, give Grandma the biggest hugs." Emma stepped forward expectantly, her homemade gifts clutched in her small hands, but Patricia's attention had already shifted to greeting other relatives streaming through the door behind us. The brief acknowledgement Emma received was a stiff nod and a distracted, "Hello, dear," before Patricia bustled away to fuss over Tyler's new girlfriend's daughter, a child she had met exactly once before. I watched Emma's face fall slightly, but she quickly recovered with the resilience that 7-year-olds possess. She skipped ahead into the living room, determined to find someone who would appreciate her handmade treasures. The house buzzed with conversation and laughter. The dining room table groaned under the weight of an elaborate spread: honey, glazed ham, prime rib, 3 different types of potatoes, green bean casserole made with organic vegetables, and a dessert display that looked like something from a fancy bakery. Patricia had spared no expense, as usual. I found myself scanning the room, mentally cataloging the familiar patterns I had observed over the years. Tyler's children received animated attention from their grandmother, who listened intently to their school stories and praised every mundane accomplishment. Emma's attempts to join these conversations were met with polite but dismissive responses. When Emma had won the school spelling bee last month, Patricia had changed the subject to Tyler's youngest son's soccer participation trophy. When Emma's artwork was selected for the district exhibition, Patricia had somehow turned the conversation to Tyler's daughter's dance recital. Every milestone Emma achieved seemed to remind Patricia of something more impressive that Tyler's children had accomplished. "You're being oversensitive," James had said when I brought this up before. "Mom treats all the grandchildren the same." But I was not imagining the pattern. Emma's birthday cards arrived 3 days late with generic messages, while Tyler's children received elaborate parties planned months in advance. Family photographs displayed throughout Patricia's house featured Tyler's family prominently, while pictures including Emma were relegated to side tables and lesser walls. The gift opening ceremony began after dinner, as it always did. Patricia positioned herself in the center of the living room like a queen holding court, surrounded by mountains of beautifully wrapped presents. The children arranged themselves in a semicircle on the plush carpet, their faces glowing with anticipation. "I have such special surprises for all my precious grandchildren this year," Patricia announced, clapping her hands together with genuine excitement. Emma wiggled closer to the group, positioning herself between her cousins with hopeful expectation. I settled onto the sofa next to James, trying to push down the nagging worry that had been building all evening. One by one, Patricia distributed gifts with theatrical flair. Tyler's eldest son received a brand new gaming system that he had been wanting for months. Tyler's daughter unwrapped a jewelry box filled with real pearl earrings and a matching necklace. The youngest boy gasped with delight over an expensive remote-controlled helicopter. Even Tyler's girlfriend's daughter, whom Patricia had met exactly once at Thanksgiving, received a wrapped present containing a designer jacket that probably cost more than my monthly car payment. Emma waited patiently as the pile of gifts dwindled. Her eyes darted between the remaining packages and her grandmother's face, searching for some sign that her turn was coming. Other family members began to notice the conspicuous absence of a gift with Emma's name, but no one dared to mention it. The distant cousins who visited maybe twice a year each received thoughtful presents. Uncle Greg's adult children, who lived across the country and rarely called, unwrapped expensive bottles of wine and cashmere scarves. As the last package was distributed to a cousin Emma barely knew, my daughter looked around the room with growing confusion. The other children were already absorbed in their new toys, tearing through instruction manuals and comparing features. Patricia began gathering the discarded wrapping paper, chattering cheerfully about the joy of giving and the importance of family traditions. She moved around the room with purpose, completely oblivious to Emma sitting alone in the center of the carpet, still wearing her red velvet dress and clutching the homemade ornaments she had brought to share. "Well, that's all the gifts," Patricia announced brightly, as if she had accomplished something wonderful. "Now, who wants hot chocolate before we start the Christmas movie?" The casual dismissal hit me like a physical blow. I watched Emma's small shoulders slump as the reality of the situation settled over her. She looked up at me with eyes that tried so hard to be brave, but I could see the hurt and confusion swimming just beneath the surface. The room erupted in excited chatter as children compared their new treasures, and adults complimented Patricia on her thoughtfulness. No one seemed to notice that one child sat empty, handed in the middle of the celebration. Or if they did notice, no one had the courage to address the obvious slight. Emma slowly rose from the carpet and walked over to where I sat, climbing into my lap without a word. She pressed her face against my shoulder, and I felt her small body tremble with the effort of holding back tears. That was when James stood up, his face set with a determination I had rarely seen before. He reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a manila envelope, the kind used for legal documents. "Actually, Mom," he said, his voice cutting through the holiday chatter with unexpected authority, "there is one more gift. This envelope was supposed to be opened last." The room fell silent as James held up the envelope, his hands steady despite the tremor in his voice. Patricia's expression shifted from confusion to alarm as she recognized the official letterhead visible through the paper. "What is that, dear?" she asked, her voice taking on the artificially sweet tone she used when trying to deflect uncomfortable situations. James cleared his throat and carefully opened the envelope, removing several documents that had been folded with precise care. Emma lifted her head from my shoulder, sensing that something important was happening but not understanding what. "This is a formal complaint I filed with the State Department of Elder Affairs 3 weeks ago," James announced, his accountant training evident in his methodical approach. "It concerns elder financial abuse, specifically involving the mismanagement of Emma's inheritance fund." The silence in the room became deafening. Tyler's children continued playing with their new toys, oblivious to the adult drama unfolding around them, but every adult in the room had frozen in place. "I don't know what you're talking about," Patricia said, but her voice had lost its earlier confidence. Her hands fidgeted with the wrapping paper she had been gathering, crushing it into tight balls. James unfolded the first document and began reading in his clear, professional voice. "Emma Henderson, Martinez, minor child, was named as the beneficiary of a trust fund established by her great-grandmother Margaret Sullivan upon Mrs. Sullivan's death 3 years ago. The fund, totaling $47,800, was to be managed by Patricia Henderson as the appointed trustee until Emma reached the age of 18. Emma looked up at me with wide eyes. "Mommy, what's inheritance mean?" Before I could answer, James continued reading. "Bank records indicate that over the past 3 years, approximately $32,000 has been withdrawn from Emma's trust fund, without proper documentation or legal justification. Patricia's face had drained of color. "Now just wait 1 minute," she began. But James held up his hand. "The withdrawals correspond directly with large expenses incurred by other family members," James said, producing a second set of documents, including private school tuition payments for Tyler's children, dance lesson fees, summer camp deposits, and the purchase of expensive gifts. Tyler jumped to his feet from across the room. "That's ridiculous. You're making this up because you're jealous that Mom loves my kids more than yours." "Sit down, Tyler," Robert said quietly, his voice carrying an authority that surprised everyone. "Let James finish." James spread the bank statements across the coffee table where everyone could see them. The numbers were highlighted in yellow marker, creating an undeniable pattern of withdrawals that matched the expensive gifts and opportunities Tyler's children had received. $3,000 withdrawn in September for private school tuition, $5,000 in July for the family vacation to Disney World, $1,500 in October for dance costumes and competition fees, $2,000 in December for Christmas presents. Patricia's hands were shaking now as she tried to defend herself. "I was managing that money responsibly. I was investing it for Emma's future." "Those were legitimate expenses." "Whose future?" James asked, his voice growing stronger. "Because Emma attends public school while her cousins attend private school with her trust fund money. Emma has never been to Disney World while Tyler's family has gone 3 times in the past 2 years." The room erupted in shocked murmurs as relatives began to piece together the implications. Uncle Greg leaned forward in his chair, studying the documents with growing alarm. "Wait a minute," he said slowly. "If Patricia was managing Emma's money, who's been managing Sarah's college fund from Dad?" James reached into the envelope again and pulled out additional papers. "That's actually part of the investigation. It appears that multiple family trusts have been mismanaged in similar ways." Patricia's defensive anger crumbled into panic. "You don't understand the pressure I've been under. The expenses, the expectations. Everyone always wants more money for their children, and I was just trying to help." "Help who?" I finally spoke up, my voice shaking with 3 years of suppressed anger. "You stole from a 7-year-old child to spoil your favorite grandchildren. You took money that was meant to secure Emma's future and used it to buy gifts for children who already had everything." Emma slipped off my lap and walked slowly toward the coffee table where the papers were spread. She looked at the bank statements with the serious concentration of a child trying to understand adult problems. "Grandma Patricia took my money?" she asked innocently. The simple question hung in the air like an accusation. Patricia reached toward Emma as if to explain, but Emma stepped back toward me with instinctive wariness. Robert stood up slowly, his face pale with shock and growing anger. "Patricia, please tell me this isn't true. Please tell me you didn't steal from our grandchildren." "I didn't steal anything," Patricia protested, but her voice lacked conviction. "I was managing the money. I always planned to pay it back." "With what money?" James asked. "Your personal accounts show consistent overspending and multiple overdrafts. You've been using Emma's trust fund as your personal piggy bank for years." Tyler's wife, Karen, who had been silent throughout the confrontation, suddenly spoke up in a voice barely above a whisper. "I knew something was wrong. When you paid for the kids' school, you said it was from your savings, but you had just told me the week before that you were worried about money." "Karen," Tyler snapped, but his wife continued. "And the vacation, and the dance lessons, and all those expensive Christmas presents. I kept asking if we should be accepting so much help, but you said it was fine because family helps family." Patricia's carefully constructed facade was crumbling in real time. The grandmother, who had seemed so generous and loving just minutes before now, stood exposed as someone who had systematically stolen from one grandchild to lavish gifts on others. James reached into the envelope one final time and pulled out an official-looking document with a court seal. Which brings me to the second part of tonight's revelation. As of this afternoon, the court has issued a temporary restraining order freezing all of Patricia Henderson's bank accounts pending a full investigation. The announcement hit the room like a thunderclap. Patricia's legs buckled, and she sank into the nearest chair, her face a mask of shock and disbelief. "You can't do this," she gasped. "It's Christmas. This is supposed to be a family celebration." "It stopped being a celebration the moment you decided to steal from a child," James replied firmly. "The court order is effective immediately. All withdrawals and transfers are suspended until the investigation is complete. Emma tugged on my sleeve, her young mind still trying to process what was happening. Mommy, does this mean I can go to college like Sarah? The innocent question broke my heart and steeled my resolve at the same time. Yes, baby, I whispered, pulling her close. Daddy is making sure your money stays safe for when you need it. Patricia looked around the room desperately, seeking support from family members who were now staring at her with expressions ranging from shock to disgust. The perfect Christmas gathering had transformed into a courtroom where her crimes were being exposed for all to see. This isn't how I wanted Emma to find out, James said quietly, his anger giving way to sadness. But I couldn't watch her be excluded one more time while her own money was being used to spoil everyone else. Patricia fumbled for her cell phone with trembling hands, her composed demeanor completely shattered. I need to call my lawyer, she mumbled, stepping away from the group as if physical distance could somehow shield her from the accusations. While she whispered frantically into the phone in the kitchen, James continued his methodical presentation of evidence. The manila envelope seemed bottomless as he extracted document after document, each one revealing another layer of financial manipulation. The investigation into Emma's trust fund led me to examine other family financial arrangements, James explained to the stunned relatives. What I discovered was a pattern of mismanagement affecting multiple family members. Uncle Greg sat forward in his recliner, his Christmas sweater suddenly seeming absurd against the gravity of the situation. What do you mean, multiple family members? James spread another set of bank statements across the coffee table, these ones bearing Sarah's name. Sarah's college fund, established by your father before his death, originally contained $62,000. Current balance is $14,700. That's impossible, Greg protested. Patricia said Sarah's fund was growing with smart investments. She's been giving me quarterly reports showing steady gains. James produced a folder thick with fraudulent documents. These reports were fabricated. The real bank statements show a pattern of unauthorized withdrawals matching the same timeline as Emma's missing money. Karen gasped audibly as the implications became clear. You mean our kids' private school tuition came from Sarah's college fund too? Among other things, James confirmed grimly. The family vacation home at Lake Winnipesaukee, the one we use for reunions every summer? The mortgage payments have been coming from various family trust funds without the beneficiaries' knowledge. Robert returned from checking on Patricia in the kitchen, his face grim. She's locked herself in the bathroom. Says she won't come out until everyone leaves. The family patriarch looked older than his 73 years as he absorbed the scope of his wife's deception. James, please continue. I need to understand exactly what my wife has done to our family. James pulled out a thick manila folder labeled Financial Forensics Analysis. His professional training had served him well in unraveling the complex web of theft and deceit. The pattern goes back at least 7 years, he explained. It started small with occasional withdrawals from inactive accounts, but escalated dramatically after Tyler's family began having financial difficulties. Tyler's face flushed red with embarrassment and anger. Our financial difficulties are none of your business. They became my business when they were solved with Emma's college money, James replied evenly. The private school tuition, the dance lessons, the elaborate birthday parties, even the down payment on your new SUV last year. All funded with money stolen from family trust accounts. The revelation about the SUV hit Tyler like a physical blow. He sank back into his chair, the fight draining out of him as he realized the extent of his mother's crimes and his own unwitting complicity. James continued his devastating presentation. But the most shocking discovery came when I examined the family business inheritance. The hardware store that Dad left to be split equally among his children? Patricia has been siphoning money from the business account to cover her gambling debts. Gambling debts? Robert's voice cracked with disbelief. Riverboat Casino in New Hampshire. Patricia has been making regular trips there for the past 3 years, initially using small amounts from the trust funds. But as her losses mounted, the withdrawals became larger and more frequent. James produced casino records that showed Patricia's escalating addiction. What had started as occasional $100 losses had snowballed into weekly trips involving thousands of dollars. The lake house mortgage is 3 months behind, James continued relentlessly. The business account has been overdrawn twice in the past 6 months. Patricia has been using credit cards to cover basic living expenses while funneling family money into gambling. Emma had been listening to the adult conversation with the focused attention that children bring to situations they sense are important but don't fully understand. She tugged on my sleeve again. "Mommy, why did Grandma Patricia take everyone's money?" The question hung in the air as family members struggled with their own versions of the same query. How had the woman they trusted with their children's futures become someone capable of such systematic betrayal? Sometimes people make very bad choices when they're scared or confused, I explained gently. And sometimes those bad choices hurt the people they love. Patricia finally emerged from the bathroom. Her makeup smeared and her holiday composure completely gone. She faced the assembled family like a defendant awaiting sentencing. "I never meant for it to go this far," she said in a voice barely above a whisper. "It started when Tyler lost his job 3 years ago. The kids were already enrolled in private school, and I thought I could just borrow a little bit from Emma's fund until things got better." "Borrow?" I stood up, my maternal fury finally breaking free. "You don't borrow from a 7-year-old's college fund without permission. You stole from my daughter and then watched her sit here tonight without a single gift while her own money bought presents for everyone else." Patricia flinched as if I had slapped her. "I always planned to pay it back. I thought if I could just win a little bit at the casino, I could replace the money and no one would ever know." "But you didn't win," Robert said quietly, his voice heavy with betrayal. "You lost more, so you stole more. And the cycle kept going." Tyler finally found his voice, though it shook with emotion. "Mom, how could you do this? How could you let us accept money that wasn't yours to give?" "Because I love you," Patricia burst out desperately. "I wanted to help my family. I wanted my grandchildren to have opportunities and nice things." "What about Emma?" I demanded. "She's your grandchild too. Or doesn't she count because she's not Tyler's child?" The accusation of favoritism that had simmered beneath the surface for years was finally spoken aloud. Patricia's face crumpled as she realized there was no defense against the obvious pattern of discrimination. I don't know," she admitted. "I guess I always felt more connected to Tyler's children. They remind me of him when he was young." The honest admission was more damaging than any denial could have been. It confirmed what I had suspected all along. Patricia had chosen favorites among her grandchildren and used stolen money to express that preference. James stood up and began gathering the documents from the coffee table. "The investigation will determine exactly how much money can be recovered and returned to the rightful beneficiaries. In the meantime, all family financial arrangements involving Patricia are suspended." "Where does this leave us for tonight?" Robert asked wearily. "I'm taking Emma home," I announced firmly. She shouldn't have to spend Christmas Eve in the middle of this mess. As I gathered Emma's coat and the homemade gifts she had brought to share, James delivered one final shock that would change everything we thought we knew about Patricia's crimes. "There's one more thing," he said quietly. "The private investigator I hired discovered that Patricia has been planning to leave the country. She purchased plane tickets to Costa Rica for next Tuesday morning, along with documentation for opening offshore bank accounts." The room erupted in shocked gasps and angry voices as the family realized that Patricia hadn't just stolen their money, she had been planning to flee with whatever she could liquidate before anyone discovered her crimes. The drive home was silent except for Emma's quiet sniffles from the back seat. James gripped the steering wheel tightly, his jaw set with determination and residual anger. I reached back to hold Emma's small hand as we navigated the snowy streets toward our modest but honest home. "Daddy, why was everyone yelling?" Emma finally asked as we pulled into our driveway. James turned in his seat to face our daughter, his expression softening as he searched for words that could explain the evening's events to a 7-year-old. "Sometimes adults make mistakes that hurt other people," he said carefully. "Grandma Patricia made some very big mistakes with money that belonged to you. And we had to tell everyone so we could fix it." Emma nodded solemnly, processing this information with the remarkable adaptability of childhood. "Can I still make her a Christmas card?" The question broke my heart and filled me with pride simultaneously. Despite everything Patricia had done, Emma's first instinct was still kindness and forgiveness. "We can talk about that tomorrow, sweetheart," I said gently. "Right now, let's focus on having a nice Christmas Eve at home." But sleep eluded me that night. While Emma eventually drifted off in her own bed, surrounded by the simple gifts we had already exchanged as a family, I sat at my laptop researching legal options and financial recovery procedures. The scope of Patricia's crimes demanded action beyond Jameis' initial complaint. By 3 in the morning, I had filled a notebook with contacts for financial fraud attorneys, victim advocacy groups, and state oversight agencies. Patricia's plan to flee the country had galvanized my determination to ensure she faced full consequences for her actions. The next morning brought a phone call from Karen, Tyler's wife, her voice shaky with emotion and guilt. "Annabelle, I need to talk to you," she said without preamble. "Can we meet somewhere private?" We arranged to meet at a coffee shop across town, away from family territory. Karen arrived, looking as though she hadn't slept, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and tired. "I've been thinking all night about what happened," she began before I could even sit down. "And I need you to know that I suspected something was wrong, but I was too scared to speak up." "What do you mean?" I asked, settling into the booth across from her. Karen's hands trembled as she wrapped them around her coffee cup. "Patricia was always so generous with our kids, but sometimes the timing seemed weird. Like when Tyler lost his job, and we were really struggling, suddenly she appeared with money for the kids' school tuition. She told you it was from her savings." "At first, yes. But then other things started happening. Expensive gifts that seemed way beyond what a retiree could afford. Paying for dance competitions that cost thousands of dollars. When I asked Tyler about it, he said his parents had been smart with their investments." Karen's voice dropped to a whisper as she continued. "But last month, I overheard Patricia on the phone with someone, talking about account balances and withdrawal limits. She sounded stressed, almost panicked. When I asked Tyler about it, he told me to mind my own business." "Why didn't you say anything?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. "Because I was terrified of what it might mean," Karen admitted. Our kids were thriving in private school. Tyler was finally getting back on his feet professionally. I didn't want to rock the boat if I was wrong, and if you were right. Karen's face crumpled with guilt. Then we were benefiting from something terrible, and I was too selfish to stop it. Her confession confirmed what I had already suspected. Patricia's crimes had been facilitated by family members who chose willful ignorance over difficult questions. The pattern of enabling had allowed the theft to continue and escalate for years. That afternoon, while Emma played with her Christmas presents in the living room, I made the phone call that would change everything. The private investigator James had hired was named Marcus Webb, a former FBI agent who specialized in financial crimes. "Mrs. Martinez," he said when I reached him. "I'm glad you called. Your husband's initial investigation was impressive for an amateur, but we've uncovered significantly more concerning evidence." "What kind of evidence?" "Patricia Henderson has been running similar schemes in her church and social groups. We've identified at least 12 other families who may have been victimized by various financial frauds involving her." The revelation staggered me. Patricia hadn't limited her crimes to family members. She had been systematically targeting vulnerable people throughout her social network. "How is that possible?" I asked. "Charity fundraisers, investment clubs, estate planning assistants," Webb explained. She positioned herself as someone knowledgeable about financial management and gained access to other people's accounts and assets. "The pattern is consistent with what she did to your family, just on a larger scale." Over the following days, as Webb's investigation expanded, I found myself at the center of a growing network of Patricia's victims. A church member named Dorothy called me after learning about the family situation through gossip networks. Patricia had convinced Dorothy to let her manage the proceeds from her late husband's life insurance policy, promising better returns than bank savings accounts. "I trusted her because she was always so generous with her grandchildren," Dorothy explained during our tearful phone conversation. "She said she wanted to help me, like she had helped her own family." Another victim was Patricia's neighbor, an elderly man named Frank who had allowed Patricia to help him with online banking after his wife died. Patricia had gradually gained access to his accounts and had been siphoning money through small, irregular withdrawals that Frank attributed to his own confusion about modern banking. Each conversation with a victim strengthened my resolve to pursue justice not just for Emma, but for everyone Patricia had harmed. I organized informal support meetings in our church basement, creating a safe space for people to share their experiences and coordinate legal responses. Emma noticed the change in our household routine as our home became an informal headquarters for victim advocacy. She adapted with remarkable resilience, quietly playing in her room while I fielded phone calls from attorneys and investigators, or entertaining herself with coloring books during meetings with other affected families. "Mommy, are you helping other people like Grandma Patricia hurt?" she asked one evening as I prepared dinner. "Yes, sweetheart. Sometimes when bad things happen to good people, we need to work together to make it right." Emma nodded thoughtfully. "Like when the mean kids at school pick on someone, and the teacher makes them apologize. Exactly like that. But for grown-ups." James had been working closely with prosecutors to build the strongest possible case against Patricia. His forensic accounting skills had proven invaluable in documenting the scope and methodology of her crimes. But it was my victim coordination work that uncovered the most damaging evidence of all. 3 weeks after the Christmas confrontation, Marcus Webb called with news that would transform our case from family financial abuse to federal criminal conspiracy. "Patricia Henderson has been working with a network of people who target elderly and vulnerable families for financial fraud," he announced. "We've tracked money movements that suggest coordination with at least 4 other individuals across 3 states. "You mean she wasn't working alone?" "Definitely not. The offshore account arrangements, the sophisticated document forgery, the coordinated timing of withdrawals across multiple victim families all point to organized criminal activity." The investigation had uncovered Patricia's connections to a larger fraud ring that specialized in what law enforcement called trust exploitation schemes. Members of the network would gain positions of trust within communities, churches, social groups, family networks, and then systematically exploit that trust for financial gain. As the scope of Patricia's crimes became clear, I realized that our Christmas Eve confrontation had done more than expose family theft. We had uncovered a criminal enterprise that had been operating undetected for years, victimizing dozens of families and individuals across New England. The knowledge that Emma's missing college fund was part of a much larger pattern of organized crime transformed my perspective on our situation. This wasn't just about family dysfunction or poor financial judgment. Patricia had been a criminal who had used her position as grandmother and trusted community member to facilitate systematic theft. But the most shocking revelation was still to come. Webb's investigation had also uncovered evidence that Patricia's escape plan was more advanced than we had realized. The plane tickets to Costa Rica were just the beginning of an elaborate exit strategy that had been in development for over a year. "She's been liquidating assets and converting them to cryptocurrency for months," Webb explained. "The offshore accounts were already established and funded. If your husband hadn't confronted her when he did, she would have disappeared with everything she could steal, leaving all her victims with no possibility of recovery." The realization that Emma had been just days away from losing any chance of recovering her inheritance filled me with a cold fury that surprised me with its intensity. Patricia hadn't just stolen from a child, she had been prepared to disappear forever, leaving Emma and all the other victims with no recourse and no justice. That night, as I tucked Emma into bed, she looked up at me with her serious, 7-year-old eyes and asked, "Mommy, are you going to catch the bad guys?" "Yes, baby," I promised, kissing her forehead. "Mommy is going to make sure all the bad guys get caught." The revelation that Patricia was planning to flee changed everything. I could no longer wait for the legal system to slowly grind through its processes while she potentially escaped justice. Emma deserved better. And so did all the other victims who had trusted Patricia with their financial security. At 2 a.m, unable to sleep with the weight of what I had learned, I called Marcus Webb's emergency number. "I want to do something that might help catch her before she runs." I told him directly. "What do you have in mind, Mrs. Martinez?" "Patricia doesn't know that we've uncovered the full scope of her crimes yet. As far as she knows, we only found the family trust issues. I think I can get her to reveal more information if she thinks I'm trying to help her." Webb was quiet for a long moment. "That would be extremely dangerous. If she suspects you're working with law enforcement, there's no telling how she might react." "But it could work, couldn't it? If I approach her as a concerned daughter, in law who wants to protect the family from scandal?" "Potentially, yes. But we would need to ensure your safety and obtain proper authorization for any recording equipment." The plan we developed over the next 48 hours was risky but straightforward. I would contact Patricia and arrange a private meeting under the pretense of wanting to discuss a peaceful resolution that would keep the family issues out of court. Webb would provide me with sophisticated recording equipment hidden in my clothing, and law enforcement would maintain surveillance from a safe distance. James was initially opposed to the idea when I explained it to him. "Annabelle, this woman has stolen hundreds of thousands of dollars from vulnerable people. There's no telling what she might do if she feels cornered. But she's also Emma's grandmother, I reminded him. She's not going to physically hurt me, especially if she thinks I'm trying to help her avoid prosecution. You don't know that. People do unpredictable things when they're desperate. Despite his concerns, James eventually agreed that the potential benefits outweighed the risks. If we could document Patricia admitting to the full scope of her crimes, it would strengthen the cases for all her victims and potentially prevent her from escaping justice. I called Patricia on a Thursday morning, 3 weeks after the Christmas confrontation. Her voice was cautious when she recognized mine. "Annabelle? I'm surprised to hear from you." "Patricia, we need to talk," I said, putting carefully practiced vulnerability into my voice. "This whole situation is tearing the family apart, and I think there might be a way to resolve things quietly." "What do you mean?" "I mean that Emma doesn't need to grow up knowing her grandmother was in prison, and the rest of the family doesn't need to have this scandal following them forever. Maybe we can work something out." Patricia's relief was audible. "Oh, Annabelle, I was hoping you would understand. You're a mother. You know how important family is. Can we meet somewhere private? I don't want James or anyone else involved right now. This needs to be just between us." We arranged to meet at Patricia's house the following morning while Robert was at his doctor's appointment. The timing would give us privacy and allow Patricia to feel comfortable in her own environment. I spent that evening practicing with the recording equipment Webb had provided. The device was smaller than a matchbook and could be activated with a simple button concealed in my coat pocket. The sound quality was excellent, and the battery would last for several hours. Emma sensed my anxiety that evening as I helped her with her homework. "Mommy, you seem worried. Is it about the bad guys again?" "I'm going to talk to Grandma Patricia tomorrow," I explained carefully. "I want to help her understand that she needs to fix the mistakes she made." Emma considered this solemnly. "Do you think she'll say she's sorry?" "I hope so, sweetheart. People who make mistakes should apologize and try to make things right." The next morning, I arrived at Patricia's house with my heart pounding, but my resolve firm. She opened the door looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her, her usually perfect appearance disheveled and tired. "Come in, dear," she said, leading me to the living room where just a month earlier she had distributed Christmas gifts to everyone except Emma. "Can I get you coffee?" "That would be nice, thank you." As Patricia busied herself in the kitchen, I activated the recording device and tried to calm my nerves. Everything depended on my ability to convince her that I was genuinely trying to help rather than gathering evidence. "I've been thinking a lot about what James said on Christmas Eve." I began when she returned with 2 cups of coffee. "And I realized that this situation is more complicated than he understands." Patricia's face brightened with hope. "Exactly! James sees everything in black and white because of his accounting background. He doesn't understand that sometimes families have to be creative with financial arrangements." "Tell me what really happened," I said gently. "Help me understand how things got so complicated." Patricia settled into her favorite chair and began talking, her relief at having someone who seemed sympathetic loosening her tongue. She described the gradual progression from small loans to herself, from family accounts to increasingly complex schemes involving multiple families. "It started when Tyler lost his job," she explained, unconsciously echoing her earlier confession. "The children were settled in their school, and I couldn't bear to see them have to leave their friends and start over somewhere cheaper. So you used some of Emma's money to help them, just temporarily. I fully intended to pay it back as soon as Tyler got back on his feet. But then other opportunities came up to help people I cared about." As Patricia talked, I guided the conversation toward more specific details. She revealed the names of other families she had helped and described the methods she used to gain access to their accounts and assets. Dorothy from church was so confused after her husband died, she didn't understand all the paperwork and investment options. "I just stepped in to help her manage things more efficiently." "And the money you were investing for her?" "Well, I did invest some of it. But when I had losses at the casino, I had to borrow from her account to cover my personal expenses. I always planned to replace it with my winnings." Patricia's casual admission to theft and fraud was being recorded with crystal clarity. But the most damaging revelation came when I asked about her travel plans. "Patricia, James mentioned something about plane tickets. Are you thinking of taking a vacation?" Her face immediately became guarded. "Why do you ask?" "Because if you're planning to leave town while this investigation is ongoing, it's going to look like you're running away. That would make everything much worse for the family. Patricia studied my face carefully, trying to determine whether she could trust me with the truth. Finally, she made the decision that would seal her fate. "Can you keep a secret, Annabelle? Something that could protect both our families from a lot of pain." "Of course," I lied smoothly. "I have been making some contingency plans," she admitted. "If the legal situation becomes too complicated, I might need to relocate somewhere that I can start fresh and work to pay everyone back." "Relocate where?" "Costa Rica has very favorable banking laws for retirees, and the cost of living is much lower, which would allow me to stretch my resources while I rebuild." Patricia went on to describe her detailed escape plan, including the offshore accounts she had established and the cryptocurrency investments she had made with stolen money. She revealed the names of her confederates in the fraud ring and described how they had coordinated their activities across multiple states. "The beauty of the system we developed is that each person only handles a small piece of the overall operation. Even if one person gets caught, the others can continue working and eventually help with legal expenses and recovery." The conversation continued for nearly 2 hours as Patricia, believing she had found an ally, revealed detail after detail of criminal activity spanning several years. She admitted to forging documents, manipulating elderly victims, and coordinating with other fraud perpetrators to maximize their illegal profits. When I finally left her house, I had obtained more than enough evidence to support federal prosecution for organized fraud, elder abuse, and conspiracy charges. But the victory felt hollow as I realized the full extent of how many people Patricia had victimized and betrayed. That evening, as I played recordings of the conversation for Marcus Webb and the federal prosecutors who had joined the investigation, I felt a mixture of satisfaction and sadness. Patricia's crimes were finally going to be fully exposed and prosecuted, but the cost to our family and community had been enormous. Emma found me in the kitchen after dinner, tears streaming down my face as the emotional weight of the day finally hit me. "Mommy, why are you crying?" she asked, climbing into my lap. "Because sometimes doing the right thing is really hard," I explained. "But it's still the right thing to do." Emma hugged me tightly, her small arms providing comfort that no legal victory could match. "I think you're brave, Mommy." "Thank you, baby. I'm trying to be brave enough for both of us." The next morning, federal agents arrested Patricia at her home as she was preparing for her flight to Costa Rica. The sophisticated recording of her confession provided the foundation for a prosecution that would ultimately expose the entire fraud ring and recover hundreds of thousands of dollars for victims across multiple states. The arrest made the local newspaper's front page, and the ripple effects through our community were immediate and profound. Patricia Henderson, the woman who had seemed like a pillar of generosity and family values, was now facing federal charges that could result in decades in prison. The trial proceedings revealed the staggering scope of her criminal enterprise. Over the course of 7 years, Patricia and her criminal associates had stolen nearly $800,000 from 43 different victims across New England. The sophistication of their operation shocked even experienced federal prosecutors. Emma's trust fund, originally $47,800, was not only fully restored but supplemented with additional compensation from the asset recovery process. The federal seizure of Patricia's hidden cryptocurrency investments and offshore accounts yielded far more money than she had stolen, creating a victim compensation fund that would help all the affected families. But the financial recovery was just the beginning of the consequences that reshaped our family dynamics permanently. Tyler and Karen's marriage nearly collapsed under the weight of their unwitting complicity in the crimes. Karen entered therapy to deal with her guilt over accepting stolen money, while Tyler struggled with the realization that his children's privileged lifestyle had been funded by theft from other children. "I keep thinking about all the times we accepted Mom's help," Tyler confided to James during one of their first honest conversations in years. "Every private school payment, every vacation, every expensive gift. Emma was paying for my kids' lives while sitting there with nothing." The couple eventually separated for 6 months while they worked through their issues with professional counseling. When they reconciled, it was with a commitment to transparency and financial responsibility that fundamentally changed how they approached family relationships. Their children, initially confused by the sudden change from private school back to public education, adapted with the resilience that children possess. Tyler and Karen used the transition as an opportunity to teach their kids about honesty, empathy, and the difference between earned and unearned privileges. Robert filed for divorce from Patricia within a month of her arrest. The man who had been married to her for 45 years found himself grappling with the reality that he had been living with a stranger who had systematically betrayed everyone they both claimed to love. "I keep asking myself how I didn't see it," he told me during one of our family dinners after the trial. "How could I share a house with someone for all those years and not realize what she was doing?" The answer, we learned through therapy and honest family discussions, was that Patricia had been a master manipulator who carefully controlled information and exploited people's trust. Robert's guilt over missing the signs was shared by many of her victims, but the responsibility for her crimes lay entirely with her. The extended family began gathering for regular dinners at Robert's house, which he had been able to keep thanks to the asset recovery process. These gatherings were different from Patricia's elaborate holiday productions. They were simpler, more honest, and focused on genuine connection rather than material display. Emma thrived in this new family environment. Without Patricia's subtle but constant criticism and exclusion, she blossomed into a more confident and outgoing child. Her cousins, initially confused by the changes in their circumstances, gradually developed genuine relationships with Emma, based on mutual respect, rather than the artificial hierarchy Patricia had created. "I like it better when we're all together like this," Emma told me one evening after a family dinner. "Everyone is nicer to everyone." Her simple observation captured the transformation that had occurred. Without Patricia's manipulation and favoritism, the family members were free to form authentic relationships based on their actual feelings rather than walking on eggshells around someone who demanded artificial harmony. The Victim Advocacy Foundation I had helped establish during the investigation continued to grow after Patricia's conviction. We had started with informal support meetings in church basements, but as word spread about our work, we received funding from state victim services programs and private donors who had been affected by similar crimes. Emma participated in some of our community outreach events, sharing her story with other children whose families had been victimized by financial fraud. Her natural empathy and resilience made her an effective spokesperson for the importance of speaking up when something doesn't seem right. My grandma took my college money to buy toys for my cousins. She would tell audiences of adults and children, but my mommy and daddy caught her and made her give it back. Now I'm going to help other kids whose money got taken. James received recognition from both his employer and professional accounting organizations for his forensic work in uncovering the fraud ring. The case became a model for how family members could identify and document financial abuse before it escalated to Patricia's level of systematic theft. But perhaps the most significant change was in the family's relationship with money and material possessions. Tyler and Karen's children learned to appreciate experiences and relationships over expensive gifts. Robert downsized to a smaller house that he could easily afford on his fixed income. The family gatherings focused on shared activities like hiking, board games, and cooking together, rather than elaborate displays of wealth. The lake house that Patricia had nearly lost to creditors was purchased by the family collectively and converted into a shared vacation property, managed by a trust fund established for all the grandchildren equally. Emma's name was prominently included in all the legal documents, symbolizing her full acceptance as a valued family member. "It's funny," James observed one evening as we watched Emma and her cousins playing together at the lake house. "Mom's crimes ended up bringing us closer together than we ever were when she was trying to control everything." The truth of his observation became clear over time. Without Patricia's manipulation and favoritism, family members were free to develop genuine affection and mutual support. The artificial hierarchy she had created through selective generosity was replaced by authentic relationships based on shared experiences and common values. Even the Christmas celebrations took on a different character. Instead of elaborate gift exchanges that emphasized material value, the family focused on handmade presents, shared activities, and charitable giving to families affected by financial fraud. Emma's transformation was perhaps the most remarkable. The shy, uncertain child who had sat empty-handed at Patricia's Christmas party became a confident advocate for fairness and justice. She started a program at her school to help classmates whose families were struggling financially, using her own experience to teach other children about empathy and inclusion. "Everyone deserves to have someone who cares about them," she explained to her second-grade classmates during a presentation about kindness. "Even when bad things happen, we can help each other feel better." The legal proceedings concluded with Patricia receiving a sentence of 12 years in federal prison, with requirements that she participate in financial crime victim impact programs and continue making restitution payments from any income she earned while incarcerated. Her criminal associates received similar sentences, effectively dismantling the fraud ring that had operated undetected for so many years. As the second Christmas after Patricia's arrest approached, our family gathered once again for a holiday celebration. But this time, the gathering was in our modest home, with decorations made by the children and a potluck dinner contributed by everyone. Emma, now 8 years old and confident in her place within the family, helped distribute gifts to her cousins with enthusiasm and genuine joy. The presents were simple, handmade items, books, and charitable donations made in each child's name to organizations that helped fraud victims. "This is better than when Grandma Patricia was here," Emma whispered to me as we watched the family laughing together around our kitchen table. "Everyone gets to be happy now." Her observation captured the essence of what we had learned through our ordeal. Authentic happiness cannot be purchased with stolen money, and genuine family love cannot be manipulated through selective generosity. The painful process of confronting Patricia's crimes had ultimately freed us all to build relationships based on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values rather than financial obligation and artificial hierarchy. 2 years have passed since that Christmas Eve when Emma sat empty-handed while her own money bought gifts for everyone else. As I write this, I'm watching her help her cousins decorate the Christmas tree in our living room, her laughter filling the house with genuine joy that no amount of stolen money could have purchased. The lake house where our extended family now gathers for holidays has become a symbol of our transformation. The property that Patricia nearly lost to creditors through her gambling and theft is now owned collectively by all family members, with Emma's name proudly included on the deed alongside her cousins. The financial recovery from Patricia's crimes yielded enough compensation to not only restore everyone's stolen funds but to establish college accounts for all the grandchildren with equal amounts. Emma's original trust fund has grown substantially, both from the recovered assets and from additional contributions made by family members who wanted to ensure she never again experienced the exclusion and favoritism that characterized Patricia's approach to family relationships. But more importantly, Emma has grown into a confident, compassionate child who understands that her worth isn't measured by the gifts she receives but by the kindness she shows to others. The Victim Advocacy Foundation that emerged from our experience has helped over 200 families recover from financial fraud and elder abuse. Emma participates in our community outreach events, sharing her story with other children whose families have been victimized by similar crimes. Her message is simple but powerful. Everyone deserves to be treated fairly, and it's never wrong to speak up when something isn't right. "My grandma stole my college money and used it to buy presents for my cousins," she tells audiences with the straightforward honesty that children possess. "But my parents fought back and got justice for everyone she hurt. Now we help other families do the same thing." James has become a recognized expert in forensic accounting and family financial fraud. His methodical approach to uncovering Patricia's crimes has been studied by law enforcement agencies and professional organizations as a model for how family members can identify and document financial abuse before it escalates to criminal levels. He frequently speaks at conferences and training seminars, using our experience to help other families protect themselves from similar exploitation. But perhaps the most significant change has been in our family relationships themselves. Without Patricia's manipulation and favoritism, the extended family has developed authentic connections based on mutual respect and shared values. Tyler and Karen, after working through their guilt and complicity in family therapy, have become some of Emma's strongest advocates and supporters. "I can't undo the years when Emma was excluded," Tyler told me recently, "but I can make sure it never happens again to any child in our family." Their marriage survived the crisis stronger than before, built on a foundation of honesty and transparency that hadn't existed when they were unwittingly benefiting from stolen money. Their children have learned valuable lessons about privilege, responsibility, and the difference between earned and unearned benefits. Robert, now 75, and remarried to a wonderful woman named Helen, who brings her own grandchildren to family gatherings, has become Emma's devoted grandfather in ways that were never possible when Patricia controlled family dynamics. He attends her school plays, helps with science projects, and takes pride in her academic achievements with the genuine enthusiasm that had been absent during Patricia's reign of selective favoritism. "I lost 45 years being married to someone who turned out to be a stranger," he reflects. "But I gained a real relationship with my granddaughter that's built on honesty instead of financial manipulation." The Christmas celebrations in our family have taken on an entirely different character. Instead of elaborate displays of expensive gifts funded by theft and favoritism, we focus on handmade presents, shared experiences, and charitable giving that reflects our values. Emma's suggestion that we donate to organizations helping fraud victims has become an annual tradition, with each family member contributing to causes that support vulnerable children and elderly individuals. Emma's confidence and sense of justice have influenced other areas of her life as well. When she noticed a classmate being excluded from playground activities because his family couldn't afford the expensive toys other children brought to school, Emma organized a toy sharing program that ensured every child had something to play with during recess. Her teacher uses Emma's initiative as an example of how young people can make a positive difference in their communities. Emma has this remarkable ability to see when someone is being treated unfairly and then figure out how to fix it. Her teacher told me during a parent conference. She doesn't just feel bad about injustice, she does something about it. This instinct for justice extends beyond school to our community involvement. Emma volunteers with me at the Victim Advocacy Foundation, helping to prepare care packages for children whose families are dealing with financial fraud cases. She understands from personal experience how isolating and confusing it can be when adults around you are fighting about money and legal problems. "I remember feeling scared that maybe I did something wrong," she explains to other children we work with. "But my mom taught me that when adults make bad choices, it's not the kids' fault, and there are always people who will help fix things." The legal precedents set by Patricia's case have influenced how financial elder abuse and family fraud cases are prosecuted throughout our state. The sophisticated recording techniques we use to document her admissions have been adopted by other investigators, and the victim coordination methods I developed have been incorporated into law enforcement training programs. Patricia herself is serving her 12-year sentence in federal prison, participating in victim impact programs that require her to confront the harm she caused to the families who trusted her. She has written letters of apology to Emma and other victims, though we have chosen not to share them with Emma until she's older and can process them appropriately. "Maybe someday I'll want to read what she wrote," Emma has said when asked about Patricia's letters. "But right now I'm more interested in helping people she hurt feel better." The profound life lesson that emerged from our ordeal is that true family loyalty requires protecting the vulnerable rather than enabling the powerful to continue harmful behavior. For too long, our family had maintained artificial peace by ignoring Patricia's obvious favoritism and financial manipulation. It took Emma's public humiliation on Christmas Eve to galvanize us into action, but that moment of crisis ultimately saved not just our family but dozens of other victims who might never have received justice. As I watch Emma now, confidently participating in family discussions and standing up for fairness in all areas of her life, I see a young person who understands that love cannot be purchased with stolen money, and that authentic relationships require honesty, even when the truth is difficult. The foundation we established in Emma's name continues to grow, providing support and advocacy for families affected by financial fraud. Emma plans to study law when she grows up, inspired by her experience with the legal system and her desire to help other children who face injustice. "I want to be the kind of lawyer who catches the bad guys and gets people's money back," she explains with the certainty that 8-year-olds bring to their life plans, because everyone deserves to be treated fairly, especially kids. Our story demonstrates that even the most painful family betrayals can become opportunities for growth, healing, and positive change. Emma's stolen inheritance was eventually restored with additional compensation, but more importantly, she gained something that Patricia's crimes couldn't touch: a strong sense of her own worth and the knowledge that her parents will always fight for her when she faces injustice. The Christmas Eve confrontation that initially seemed like a family disaster ultimately became the catalyst for building authentic relationships based on honesty, mutual respect, and shared values. Emma's exclusion from Patricia's gift-giving ceremony was cruel and hurtful, but it also revealed patterns of favoritism and financial abuse that might otherwise have continued indefinitely. Today, as our family prepares for another Christmas celebration at the lake house that we almost lost to Patricia's crimes, am grateful for the painful lessons that led us to this stronger, more honest version of ourselves. Emma will receive gifts this year, just like all her cousins, but more importantly, she'll be surrounded by family members who value her for who she is, rather than what she can provide them. The envelope James pulled out that Christmas Eve contained legal documents that exposed years of systematic theft and betrayal, but it also contained something more valuable: the foundation for building a family culture based on justice, fairness, and authentic love, rather than financial manipulation and selective favoritism. Emma's story reminds us that protecting those we love sometimes requires the courage to confront uncomfortable truths and challenge people who abuse their positions of trust. Standing up to bullies and thieves, even when they're family members, creates a better world for everyone, especially children who depend on adults to keep them safe and treat them fairly. Have you ever had to choose between keeping family peace and standing up for what's right? Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is refuse to enable harmful behavior, even when it means facing difficult consequences. Emma's courage in that moment of public humiliation and our family's determination to seek justice ultimately protected not just our daughter but dozens of other victims who might never have received the help they deserved. If this story resonated with you, please like this video to let me know it was helpful. Subscribe to hear more stories about families who found strength in difficult situations and discovered that fighting for justice can lead to deeper, more authentic relationships. Share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about how one family transformed a painful betrayal into an opportunity for growth and healing. Thank you for listening to Emma's story and for supporting families who have the courage to stand up against injustice. Remember that true loyalty means protecting the vulnerable, and authentic love requires honesty even when the truth is difficult to hear. Sometimes the most challenging moments in our lives become the foundation for building something better, stronger, and more meaningful than what we had before.